If you need regos, otherwise you probably know. Thanks. I need these. Can't see. All right, just thanks everyone for coming. I'll just tell you the format for today. We've got 3 speakers. We've got Rod Culleton, we've got Len Harris, and we've got Nicola Charles. Each of them will be coming and talking for about half an hour. And then at the end of their talk, there'll be a Q&A where you're able to ask them questions about what they're talking about and the topics, and whether you have, obviously, any queries, which they'll be happy to answer. There will be a roaming mic. So when you've got the mic, that's when you ask the question. Please don't yell out your questions to mobile phones and on silent, please. Toilets are on the left here, all the way to the end, and there's a whole row of toilets. Don't share those. Go into separate ones. All right. But other than that, that'll be it. We'll just wait for the people that are moving their cars, and then we'll get started, okay? Alrighty, we may as well get started. So, first speaker today will be Rod Culleton, former Senator of WA, who obviously needs no introduction. He does amazing work. He's come over from WA, so it's a really long run, so I don't know how he did it. Obviously his heart's back in place and it's all working well, which is great to hear. And without further ado, I'll get Rod up here. Thank you, Rod. Oh, you plugged in. We're going to start off with the video. It's the crowd strike that we had yesterday.
Feel the wind, it's rising high. Revolution in the sky. Catch the flames, we're blazing through. True blue makes me and you. Sisters, brothers, hand in hand. Stronger now, we make a stand. Nothing's gonna hold us down. Side by side, we'll wear the crown. We are one, we are Australia. Together strong, we're never failing. From the outback to the sea, we unite as family. We unite as family. Footsteps echo across the land. In the voices soar, bound together forevermore. In the sun or in the rain, we're united, we'll remain.
I knew when he reserved his decision, he was going away to write it, so he'd sharpen the knives, and he was pretty quick to use them. He was quicker than my local butcher.
In his words, he said, "I'll float on my back and I'll I'll swim to the side of the rip." He says he's not panicking.
We are one, we are Australia, together strong, we're never failing. From the outback to the sea, we unite.
He created an Oz exit, and I think it's prosperous times for everyone.
Together strong, we're never failing. From the outback to the sea, we unite as family. Sing aloud, let voices soar, bound together forevermore. In the sun or in the rain, we're united, we'll remain. We unite as family. Sing it loud, let voices soar, bound together forevermore. In the sun or in the rain, we're united, we'll remain.
Well, good evening, everyone. I am. It touches me because we must remember who we are and where we come from. And I'm very honoured to come over to the eastern side of Australia from the west, although not coping with the low temperatures, but I probably need a little bit of aerostart to get going here today. But once I get up to running temperature, I'll be fine. But look, my goal is to deliver, not only for West Australians, but to deliver not only what I achieved when I was in a parliament, if you may call it that. It was a parliament that is without jurisdiction, there is no question about that. But before I get to that, it's not only for what we've done for Western Australia and wrote the terms of reference to the Royal Commission and proved that the banks had been not acting Australian, certainly not acting treating Australians and their customers to the level that they should be, but is to stand up for all Australians. So once a federal senator, always a federal senator. And I've had to reflect back on my time. I reconstituted in effect reconstituted the High Court, which I knew once I pitched that question in the chamber, and I will refer to it later, that my time there was numbered. But that didn't concern me one bit at all, because like any person, once you can see the shot, you take the shot. And I took the shot, and it was a bullseye. And that's where the elephant's been bleeding through the snow, and quietly it's coming to an end. In order to, I guess, have people understand what we need to do, I don't want to be a politician that just sits up here and talks. As you all know, I'm certainly a dog in the fight. There is no question about that, and I've fought some pretty tough opponents, not only the government, but Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecutions and other politicians. But I'm still here, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And, I did say to a journo once, they go, "How do you keep coming on?" I said, "Well, I'm like a sealed 20-gallon drum. You can pull me so far down, but I'll pop up eventually." But what we need to do is understand who we are. And I look in the audience, and no disrespect for the men, but, it's the women that are really concerned more so about our country. I know the men are, well, I'm one of them, but the women are so strong. And when I go to rallies and whatever, I can tell you there's more women at the rallies than what there are men. And if it wasn't for them, I just don't think I'd have the courage to continue on, because I would think the message would be very difficult to get through if it was just a men's club. Not that I'm biased towards that, but that's a fact. And the women are more concerned because of the future of our children, and that's just the instinct of being a strong mother. But we are the problem, and I tell you why we're the problem. It is because when we rock up to the voting poll to put our power of attorney into any so-called representative that wants to represent you, first of all, you don't want someone representing you, you want someone defending you, because to represent is to represent, and they represent you as a corporate soul. So how does it work? Well, first of all, they put up the call flutes, and their call flutes are in corporate. So they have pure English for their Christian name, and if you notice, their surnames are all in all caps, meaning we're putting you into a different jurisdiction. That jurisdiction is the Australian government. Our true Commonwealth Parliament is the one that they call Old Parliament House down the hill. And if you were to attend Canberra, you don't see New Parliament House up the hill. And one of the biggest regrets I had was when I spoke at that rally. I did say to the organisers, we need to tell everyone to go back to the Commonwealth, and that is to just walk over the grass and go back to what they call Old Parliament House. But they told me to do that at a later date, and that is one of the biggest regrets that I had, because when I first got into the Parliament, I was inducted as a senator, and I absorbed it like a sponge. And Nicola is holding the Quick and Garran down there, and I've got this very important book here, which I'll read out the very first page, which a lot of senators don't even pick this book up. It's just amazing. They just get told what to do. But I had to do a Paul Murray Live, and I went down to what they called Old Parliament House, and we sat in there, and I sat in the Senate chamber, and this eerie feeling came over me, and I'm just going, you know what, this is our Parliament. I felt at home there. And then when I went up to the other place up the hill, it just was hollow. And it was from that day then I thought, no, we're out of jurisdiction. And given the effects of what needs to then happen is, in order to properly defend your people, and I say that, people of Australia, is to take the correct contract. And what happened when I was in the Parliament, and this book says you must and shall take the correct contract to the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act, not to the Australian Constitution, because we don't have an Australian Constitution, we have a Commonwealth of Australia Constitution. I mean, when you go and get a bank loan, you don't sign your name as Dick, you've got to put your proper name on there. And that is the right that that is for our rights. And when we don't do that, and we put in a corporate government, we only have privileges. So that's why it's a privilege to drive on the road. You need a licence, but that licence doesn't belong to you, it belongs to the state. because you're in all caps. So, but we're not going to go into the depths of that today. But that is the twin jurisdiction. So, what do we need to do? Well, first of all, to properly get defending and get remedy, you have to take the correct contract to give you the executive power. So when Len Harris and I became senators, we had to take a contract to the office. So it's the office, so it's the title, Senator Rod Culleton for Western Australia. There are 12 senators elected out of every state, and there are 2 out of every territory. That might have changed now, might be 1, is it? Still 2 out of every territory. So they hold the office. They hold the office. 76 jurors, 76 senators sit in the High Court of Parliament. Now that is higher than the High Court. The Parliament, the Senate, has more power than the House of Lords in London under our law. Unfortunately, there are no one sitting in there other than these 2 little jokers here that I'm aware of that have taken the contract in order to hold such an office. So we can't even say they're purporting to hold office because they hold no office at all. And that is not a conspiracy theory, that is the law. And jurisdiction is juris, which is law, land, air, water. That is your 3 jurisdictions. Dicto is language and speech, because that's what frames the law and democracy and for our society to continue on and do our trade and so forth overseas. So there has been a departure from the Crown, and while you're outside the Crown, you've had the cage removed from you and you're exposed. The good thing about being an Australian is we were granted a Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act by the United Kingdom government, and that is the founding deeds to say, and this is no disrespect to First Nation people, that from our point, being where we come from, is our title deeds to this great nation. And those title deeds are vested in that law, and you can see it right here. And it doesn't have to be such a complex law. It is, once you read it at the level that Len and I have done it, you get to really understand what the gambit is and what the law is. It's not hard. And again, while we're not under the Commonwealth, we don't have any rights. When we're under Australian government, under a corporation which is making reference to Queen of Australia, you only have privileges. And that's why, people say to me, oh yes, but in your, sorry, I've got to keep this apolitical today, but in one of our policies and no offence, but one of our policies we say, under the Constitution, you don't have to pay tax. And that's true, you don't. And people go, yes, but I pay tax. Oh, do you? And yes, so that's just a nonsense. And I say to them, well, when did you last pay tax? Oh, well, I paid it a fortnight ago, because when I got my wages, I said, well, who'd you pay it to? And they go, well, I didn't pay it. It was taken out of my salary. I said, well, so you're not paying tax. So this is how they've constructed this scheme. It's a counterfeit, and very, very articulate, very, very clever, I must say. But all they've pretty well much done is reflected something out the side to say, well, okay, that's how the law sees you, because it happened in 1973. Labor wanted to enter into why they would go to war for the New World Order, because basically it took the cage away and allowed other entities to come into this country and take your profits, basically, and that's what I was not happy about. So after doing extensive research and with my boys in Canberra and having a good understanding with the librarians, and I treated them with the utmost respect, simply because I didn't ever think I'd get into the parliament. I guess it was something I didn't think about on the farm, but I have. And we had 4 librarians working for us, and we ended up uncovering the 1988 Constitutional Report, which the highest apex minds in this country declared that we were basically a de facto republic, and that the title executive power could not be divided, and that the bills that Labor were trying to implement into the parliament were unconstitutional, and you couldn't take away the executive power of the Constitution because it's a well-balanced document, and obviously it belongs to the people. It doesn't belong to a parliament. They are to serve us, but unfortunately under this new gambit that they've got, we are subordinate to it until we correct it. So I'm here on this campaign, we are going to run again, myself and Nicola is for Victoria, for the purpose of going back into a jurisdiction to get out of that jurisdiction so that we can get our Commonwealth up and going. And we have essentially abandoned our parliament. And I did do a memorandum of understanding with the First Nations people, and was organising to go back and step on Commonwealth Parliament down the hill. And unfortunately, a week before we got there, the front doors were burnt down. So we're on the money. I've been to London. It's amazing how Australian government can't file an appearance in London, yet it's supposed to be under a UK Act. So these are the things that I and my team and Len have done, because we must take a position. And while we have that law behind us, and why the first duty of a duly sworn senator, and I'll say a duly sworn senator, I was duly elected, I wasn't duly elected, but I was duly sworn because I took a contract to the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act, although the governor was a Governor-General doing business as a Governor-General, because he's under a corporate title. But for the purpose of that, my contract was to the Crown. My office sat as the Crown, and that's why I will always obey the Crown. And that is our protection. So it doesn't matter what the United Kingdom do, it doesn't matter what Prince Charles, the King, might be doing or so forth. It is the law that we've adopted to run this country. And the title, all that must be in the correct wording. It must be, all the patents have to be adhered to. And because, patents are patents, and they're our patents. And so by my my knowledge, because I sit actually higher than a High Court judge because the people put me there. And I spotted the problem that the High Court was not issuing its writs in the name of the Queen, and completely, basically got rid of the Chief Justice, French, the Principal Registrar of the High Court, Andrew Phelan. I even got rid of the law officer, Pirani, of the Australian Electoral Commission, and then the citizenship saga, that I triggered all that. I even got rid of the Prime Minister because I wrote the terms in reference to the Royal Commission, and I sat with Pauline Hanson and Malcolm Turnbull, and I said, Malcolm, you hold the executive position as a Prime Minister. You can sever the cord to a Royal Commission. He said, absolutely. And I said, well, the law is quite to the contrary, actually. He said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I've based these terms and reference around the laws of the Royal Commission Act of 1903, I think it is, 2 or 3. And it says that you have to be the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Australia, not the Australian government. So all of a sudden Turnbull said, we're not holding a Royal Commission. He was gone. So the Clerk of the Senate, Rosemary Lang, went trying to give me an incorrect contract to take. So from there on, we knew that we're on the target, and we just need to take our knowledge forward. I do believe, you come to a lot of shows that want to be apolitical, and that's fine, but if you don't put a player on the footy field through the interchange bench and start kicking goals and having the people watching the game see the scoreboard going up and then taking the premiership and putting that premiership under the crown, well then really and not going to the polls to vote is not the answer. So what we have to do is put everything back into jurisdiction. And, as controversial as I may have been, I've been the dog in the fight and I've been winning. And the Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecution has dropped 3 attempts to put me in jail for 3 years, dropping all the charges at the 11th hour because they have no prosecutorial power under the Commonwealth. So there's no power. So while we allow the Australian government to run on this little genset, puffing away behind some big concrete pillar, and basically telling all the people that they have the power when the grid is connected to the parliament down the hill, we will always suffer and we will lose our rights in this country. And the law says it very clear. If you sit on your rights, you have no rights. So I'm about, with Len, this goes to property too. I mean, going to digital IDs and all that, that's not substance anymore. It's not even form. It's nothing. It's nothing to touch. It's just a mirage. And it is clear that in 1936, Canberra was known as the Australian Federal Territory. It was the AFT. Then once it got into commerce and all the overseas banks came in, it became the Australian Capital Territory. Capital is commerce, and that's your overseas bank, and we're about wanting to bring back our sovereign bank. So when they say it's the ACT, they're giving you knowledge, it's just an act. And we continue to allow this act to continue. And you will go down the road, and when you leave this place, and you'll have a look at a stop sign, you'll look at a road works ahead, or bridge works ahead, or turn left, pull over, emergency lane, are all in all caps. But when you actually see the big boards going down the highway that actually say, Gibson or Melbourne or whatever, it's spelt in English. So currently everyone thinks we're in the state of Victoria. We are no longer a state in Victoria. Why? Because we only became states under the Constitution at Federation. And if Australia is running under the Australia Act of 1986 and is not running under the Commonwealth of Australia Act of 1900, how may this be the state of Victoria? It is not. And that's why you've had your Premier and all that pretty much tell you what you have to do, because they're telling your corporate soul, because we don't have the jurisdiction as a corporation to defend ourselves. So now is the time you come back and we take back what our Anzacs fought for in this country. And that's what I love. I often wonder what went through their minds to put their bodies on the line for us, and we've just sat here and let these bunch of cowboys, and that's all they are in Parliament. They don't even pick up these books. They're not even passing legislation under law. They're not even sitting corrate. They're making purported referrals. They're spending money like there's no tomorrow, and we've got homeless people on the street which deserve the benefits of this country, because we are the beneficiary of the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth is the wealth of the commoner. So I'm asking this as an inaugural touchdown that you support the petition to go into London. We've got to get 100,000 signatures. We now start supporting the campaign, because Great Australian Party, keeping it apolitical to a point, is your party to come back to the Commonwealth. It is also getting other politicians to realise that they must go out and put their core flutes in English, because there can be no presumption in the existence of power. And the Quick and Garran makes it very clear that it has to be put in English. Law is got to be in English for everyone to understand. So that is my plight. I'm perhaps not going to do it forever. It's had a toll on me, as everyone knows, but I'm strong enough to keep this going, and as long as I get the support of the people, it's now time whether people have a pooey or get off the potty, and I'm not going to force them to go anyway. They have to do it themselves, and both myself, Len, and former Senator Bob Day are prepared to lead the charge to go forward. You've got 3 senators now. Well, they've ratified the work that I've been doing. We've just served a quo rento on the clerk of the Senate. Couldn't have pitched that one any better. And yeah, now it's time. So look, what I'll do is I just want to, because we'll go to question time, I'm sure, but I just want to go to number 3, or number 2 actually, and just show you where the trick is being played. And that is where you think your Prime Ministers are taking a contract and they're not. Hopefully I've got the numbers right, but oh, hang on,
Now, Senator Culleton, it was you who spotted this discrepancy. It was you who spotted the discrepancy in the High Court rules, which the High Court Rules Committee has now acted upon. I might say, since those rules were promulgated in 2004, there have been 16 distinguished Australian jurists sit on the High Court, including 2 Chief Justices. And I must congratulate you, Senator Culleton, on being the first person to spot the problem.
The Constitution is still valid, still real. The Queen is... I interviewed Professor David Flint last Saturday on my show on TNTradio.live. He confirmed that the Constitution is real, it is solid. We're effectively a republic with a president in the form of a Queen that is appointed by our Parliament.
Okay, go to number 3, please.
Alumna, where the swearing-in ceremony is about to begin.
Mr Abbott, I invite you to take the oath of office as Prime Minister.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
I, Anthony John Abbott, do swear that I will well and truly serve the people of Australia in the office of Prime Minister, and that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Australia, so help me God.
Mr Morrison, I invite you to take and subscribe the oath of office as Prime Minister of Australia.
I, Scott John Morrison, do swear that I will well and truly serve the people of Australia in the office of Prime Minister, and that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Australia, so help me God.
Gets better. Maybe I'll cut. Here we go. Listen to this one.
Good morning. I invite you to take and subscribe the oath of office as Prime Minister.
I, Kevin Michael Rudd, do swear that I will well and truly serve the Commonwealth of Australia, her land and her people in the office of Prime Minister, so help me God.
Mr Albanese, I invite you to take and subscribe the affirmation of office as Prime Minister of Australia.
I, Anthony Norman Albanese, do solemnly and sincerely affirm and declare that I will well and truly serve the Commonwealth of Australia, her land and her people in the office of Prime Minister.
Just go to number 5, please. Now, I want you to watch this video. It'll give you an understanding of what I'm talking about.
Australia, we are no longer a nation. We have become a corporation. Wake up, wake up, wake up.
Wake up, Australia, wake up, stand up, rise up, Australians, rise up. Did you know
not a country but a corporation. The time has come to take a stand for the freedom of every woman, child, and man. Wake up, wake up, Australia, wake up, stand up, rise up, Australians, rise up. Back in 73, Whitlam did the deed that sabotaged our nation. He went behind our backs, made a royal style act, defied our constitution. He went around without a sound and left us in confusion. This led the way to where we are today, on the edge of communism. Oh, wake up, Australia, wake up, stand up, rise up, Australians, rise up. Gough and Fraser too, they fooled me and you, took away our rights and freedoms. Then came Bob Hawke with all his talk, made a hollow corporation. Through the Australia Act, only the politicians back, without our knowledge and ratification. The time has come when we must be as one in the Commonwealth of Nations. Wake up, Australia, wake up, stand up, rise up, Australians, rise up. We've got to hold on to our sovereignty. We the people must be free, must be free. Yeah. Wake up, Australia, wake up, stand up, rise up, Australians, rise up. Wake up, Australia, wake up, stand up, rise up, Australians, rise up. Wake up, Australia, wake up, stand up, rise up, Australians, rise up.
Okay. There's the offer by the majors. There you go. In actual fact, that's all in all caps. That is not English. When you read the law says it must be in English for the people. This is the person. So if you look at that, that is all corporation. So they don't have to take... People say, well, they'll be done for treason. Well, no, they can't be done for treason. Or they can be done for defrauding. Well, perhaps. But they're not in law. The High Court judges have said there's been a complete departure. These books clearly can't be wrong. They've been written under history. Now, let me tell you, this is the oath and affirmation. And the beautiful thing about our team is we've been doing freedom of information, and we get these documents back when we ask for them. You know, where's the instrument that took away our Great Seal of the Commonwealth and replaced it with the Seal of Australia? And no document exists. They don't know. In actual fact, when you really put the test to them, they fall away. Even the local police officers aren't officers of the Crown. They're policy enforcers. Know that very well because I've had a fair bit of interaction with them. Certainly got a lot of people home past what they call an alleged border. I mean, we're one self-governing colony. And so all we have is political limitations. Now, I know that as a federal senator, it's very clear. There are no internal state borders. In actual fact, if you want to go and see our borders, you go out to 12 Mile out to sea. And it's very interesting that the wind farms that they're trying to put in Western Australia, guess where they're building them? 400 metres past the jurisdiction of Australia. So it's 12.4 kilometres out. So in other words, the Australian taxpayer pay for all the infrastructure, but the international companies will own and make the money. I mean, it's just a joke. So let me just, I'll be very quick now, Len. No, I just, I don't want to be. So chapter 1 of this is what you get as a senator. Okay, this is the book. Okay, not interested in what might be judgment in a lower jurisdiction. I mean, I call the Australian government or Parliament House a daycare centre for morons, to be honest. Chapter 1, the Senate and its constitutional role. The Parliament of the Commonwealth of Australia, not the Australian government, which is given power to make laws for the Commonwealth by the Constitution, has 2 elected houses of the Senate and the House of Representatives. It must be the Commonwealth. Okay, so if I go to this book, here's an FOI, and it clearly says, 10th of June, okay, your letter dated 31st of May 1999 to the Australian Electoral Commission, well, I know them well, the Australian Electoral Commission. In actual fact, they just detest me because we're an unincorporated party, much to their disgust, and they've been trying to refer me, but they're like a rockwheeler on a chain that come out and bark, and then the chain takes up and they can't touch me. But be as it may, the Australian Electoral Commission on the subject of members' oaths and affirmations of allegiance was referred to the Department of House of Representatives for answer in respect of members of the House. An oath or affirmation of allegiance by members and senators is a requirement of the Australian Constitution. Well, there's the nonsense. It's got to be the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution. No provision of the Commonwealth Electoral Act 1918 are involved. Section 42 of the Constitution states, every senator and every member of the House of Representatives shall, which is a command, before taking his seat, make and subscribe before the Governor-General or some person authorised by him as an oath or affirmation of allegiance in the form set out forth in the schedule of this Constitution. The wording of the oath or affirmation is set out in the schedule to the Constitution as follows. I, Rod Culleton, for argument's sake, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Victoria, heirs and successors according to law, so help me God. You are not seeing that there today. So it is up to all of us, while we have this beautiful Constitution, which is indissoluble, I might add, you've got it. So, and it's a beautiful, well-balanced document. And the Senate manual clearly says here exactly what's defined in that FOI, that you cannot take your office until you take that contract. And then, once you take that contract to the Commonwealth of Australian Constitution, you do a naughty job, yes, you are done for treason. Okay, there is serious consequences, but why you allow these guys to go in and you're putting them in as a corporate soul, they are not subject to any law, and that's why they write themselves cheques, become these big role models and become very wealthy. In actual fact, it's amazing what this corporation will offer you to buy a vote, and there are plenty of people in there that go in there with very limited money and come out very healthy. So I'm not one of them. In actual fact, I've spent more money back into the system than what I've actually taken out of it. So that'll wind me up. I've put these videos together. I helped write the lyrics to Kelly. Kelly is a great supporter of mine. She's farming down where I come from. I don't know any better way to come and explain it to you other than not only myself but the Anzacs and all the Australian people, I believe, want you to support this constitutional manifesto correction to get our great nation back. Thank you very much. It's question time. Questions? Stunned, are you? Can I just invite Nicola Charles up to stand by me, please? Sorry.
Thank you for everything. Everything. And for us here today. My question is, as we the people are the ultimate supreme uncontrollable authority under our constitution.
Correct.
Why do we simply not take the seats of our parliament back?
Well, you need to ask yourself that question.
I'm ready.
Well, that's good because the Australian federal. Well, the other day I went to Canberra, and as soon as I pulled the political coach up, the Australian Federal Police came around like flies over a cow dung, and we had Sean. I don't know if you saw Sean. Yeah, Sean the sheep. Because Murray Watts can't shut... I know there's a lot of controversy over the live sheep export and whatever, but I'm telling you right now, their agenda, and it's not a fantasy, we'll be all perhaps eating insects in the future, but this is the extreme that we're going to, and we don't have to participate as Australians. We just need to... We've got the best agriculture. I'm a farmer. And, you know, we've been winning, and we've proven that farms have been taken unlawfully on non-monetary defaults. I mean, like I said, I wrote the terms of reference to the Royal Commission. I knew no one would ever be prosecuted because it was done under a corporate Queen of Australia. But getting back to what I'm saying, if the people were to go back to their parliament, you don't have to take it back, it's yours. You own it. You're paying everyone. You're actually paying. It's like when I went to Parliament House in Western Australia to talk. I had this copper come up to me, he goes, I hope you got a licence. I said, why would I need a licence? And, well, I didn't say that. I said, am I required to have one? Okay, don't go to statement. Am I required to have one? Well, absolutely. I said, well, why would I need one when I own the joint? And this copper sits there and says, yeah, well, it's up to you, mate. I said, I don't need a licence. I own the joint. I pay their wages. In actual fact, I pay yours as well. These guys don't know until you know, out at the border, they had no idea. They didn't know whether, at the end of the day, they didn't know whether they were a bloody cop or a bloody public, whatever. So, but look, we got everyone home over this political limitation, and but of course they wanted the 2 to G2 pass. That's contracting with you. So, but your answer is, yeah, walk home to your parliament, because everyone has the right to go to their honest seat of government, and we don't have a government at the moment.
So how many people we need?
Well, I got to be careful that I'm not done for inciting. But the law says you can go home. And the Australian Federal Police have no jurisdiction. They used to be the Commonwealth Federal Police, or the Commonwealth Police Force, I should say, and then Whitlam turned them into the Australian Federal Police. The Parliament down the hill is our Commonwealth Parliament. That is Commonwealth jurisdiction, and no corporation has jurisdiction. Because remember, a government can only regulate, it can't create. So under its powers of Section 51, so it can't create bills to shut down Commerce and Trade, which is 51-1, which is what we served on Murray Watts. I mean, Murray Watts went into the Parliament at the same time as I did. He's a lawyer, he was Anna Blight's advisor, and now he's the Agriculture Minister. Like I said, he wouldn't know which end of a sheep ate grass, and he's telling us that we're shutting down a live sheep trade when there is no quarantine issue with those sheep. Those sheep are born on Crown land, they remain on Crown land, they go on Commonwealth Highway, they go to a Commonwealth port, and he's wanting to shut it down. So it has it's always been a good industry. The sheep, the wethers, they're very healthy, they're in good score, and it's a market. And people say, oh yes, but it's cruel going on the water. Well, go to your local abattoirs and see perhaps what's going on there too, sitting out there in the hot sun. Unfortunately, it is what it is. It's a trade. But this is another way of getting rid of all our farmers. And now with what Dutton is saying with the nuclear, is now 11,000 farms are going to be subject to nuclear exposure. That's another scare campaign. We will have no Australian farmers. And we stand for Australian farmers because that is rural community. I'm a country boy. So let's just go home to our Parliament, and I don't care what happens up the hill, because you know what? They can't make answer. They've never come out to try and say that Rod Culleton is not on the money. In actual fact, the former Solicitor General took me back to court in the High Court, and he said he was former, I won't name his name, well yes I will, David Bennett. He was Solicitor General for John Howard for 11 years, and you know what, he took me to his Sydney home, and his wife is a federal court judge, and they said, keep going, you're on the money. Thank you.
We've got another question.
Yeah.
Come up please, Nicola. I want to introduce to Nicola Charles. We're very fortunate to have her, and look, to be honest, all of you are very fortunate to have her putting her hand up to run for the Federal Senate for Victoria.
It's quite early in the game for me, so I feel like I should say welcome to the White Rabbit podcast. I don't know if any of you have ever seen my show. I think it's... thank you, Rod.
Yeah, no problem.
I was very emotional along with you guys when Rod was speaking. I think it's very poignant that we're in a church because what we're facing in the world today is enormous evil. And I am one of those women, I'm one of those mums that Rod was referring to who had enough. So I came to this country in 1995. I'm British by birth, but I'm often described as an adopted Australian or just an Australian now. And I consider myself 100% Australian made. And so I came here to work. I was one of these migrants, and I guess I still am one of these migrants, like many of us who came from other nations. And we came to build this country and to work in this country, and that's what I did. And I had a great time. Many of you will know that I had a very successful career in television and then radio. And I thought, and still believe, that Australia is the best country in the world. And I never considered myself in any way to be a slave. I never considered myself in any way to be controlled by any government or by any politics. I was happy to pay my taxes. I believed in a military deterrent, and I believed in the police force. And then in 2020, along came Daniel Andrews. And like for many of you, I suddenly sat up. And I think one of the worst decisions made by this, what I consider to be an international criminal cartel that has subverted our democracy and our constitutions with corporate contract law, because who among us goes around swatting up on corporate contract law? Well, unfortunately, now we have to. I had no idea that someone would stand there publicly on television and tell me that I could only go outside for 1 hour a day. Honestly, I thought it was a joke. And I thought, well, this can't happen, this won't happen. And the next thing I heard was Daniel Andrews said that people couldn't go to the pub. No, I'm not someone who hangs out in pubs, but I go occasionally. And I laughed. I laughed out loud because I thought every single Australian I know will say, rack off, mate, you know, I'm going down the pub for a tinny or whatever, you know, whatever Australians say. And that didn't happen. And to my absolute horror, I started watching everyone comply. I think it was very foolish to lock us down because, well, what did we do? We got bored. Initially, I started watching back-to-back episodes of Family Guy. My husband likes Family Guy, thinks it's quite funny. And I honestly thought it was 2 weeks to flatten the curve. So I tweeted out to my television fans, I'm getting a master's degree in Family Guy. And Fox in America retweeted it, and I thought, this is great. This lockdown's brilliant. I'm already getting more followers on Twitter. And I really didn't take it that seriously. And then I realized something else was going on. And the moment I realized something else was going on, and it sort of bore into a different part of my brain that made me eager to do research, was when Scott Morrison did a speech about vaccine rollouts. And I wasn't initially on board with that. My mother in the UK was a microbiologist before she retired. She never let me take antibiotics. She never let me get anything done. She didn't even let me get my tonsils out. Even when they were huge and covered in white mushrooms, she said, just take a drink of water and swallow those mushrooms down. And I thought, this is great. All the other kids get to go to the doctor, and I don't get to go to the doctor. But Scott Morrison stood there and he was talking about this awful vaccine rollout. Yes, I'm a horrid anti-vaxxer. I guess I'm just anti-science at the moment because I think it's been hijacked. And he stood there and he said, so, you know, everyone can go out and, you know, we've got these lists of people again. This started to give me chills. They started referring to certain groups and lists of people. And I thought, why are we dividing up society? Something else is going on here. And he stopped, and I won't do it on this because it will collapse. He stopped after he talked about vaccine rollouts and within a split second went, now, climate change. And honestly, my whole world collapsed because I've always considered myself to have really good instincts as a woman and as a mother. And I looked at him in his $12,000 suit and I said, something else is going on. Why would you talk about vaccines and then slap the podium and go into climate change? So what we're looking at now is something that is affectionately termed by us conspiracy theorists. Apparently I'm a conspiracy theorist, according to Anthony Albanese in the ABC, who hailed me as such because I went up against the Voice to Parliament referendum, because I would always go up against amendments to constitutions because constitutions are wonderful. Why would you ever amend them? My suggestion online to Anthony Albanese was, why don't you just give all the Crown land back to the Aboriginals? We're all fine with that. Didn't hear a word back. No, because you don't need to change the constitution. You can get your checkbook out or you can stop mining on sacred land. So what we've got here in this fifth generation war is subtle attacks that we can't really see and we don't really hear about, but we can feel. We're feeling it physically now, those who've become ill. We're feeling it psychologically. We're feeling it emotionally. We're feeling it democratically. We're feeling it economically. We're absolutely all feeling it economically. And what we're living through right now, these days that we're standing in, is the new Event 201. And I don't know if any of you know about Event 201. I'm sure you do. This little cyber breakdown practice that we're living through, I believe, and many believe, who are well versed in these things, is a practice for the big one. Now, the big one has been told to us that it's coming by unelected people like Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum, by Yuval Harari, by Bill Gates, and we must get prepared for the big cyber attack. Now, the problem with these people is the way they predict the future is they invent it. And don't they look clever when they do it? Bill Gates writes books on how to save us from climate change and then makes the climate change. They warn us that we're going to be in a cyber attack and cyber warfare, and then they flick the switch. And this is what they do. They keep us jumping from one foot to the next, because if we're focused on the financial side or the health side or the economic side or the psychological side, there's just too much for us to deal with. And all this is being allowed to happen because of much that Rod has referred to. So he talked about the freedom of information request at GAP, and I just want to go into it a little bit more with you. So we have a wonderful lady who works with us at GAP who puts all of this paperwork together, and her mind is just incredible. So she said, let's put in this freedom of information request to the Attorney General's office and ask, who is the Queen of Australia, and what was the date of her coronation? And I got really excited because all these pictures were going around the internet of this supermodel. Did you see it, the blonde girl? And it said, I'm the Queen of Australia. And I thought, wow, we're actually going to find out who she is. And there was much talk of her being sort of one of these female Australian billionaires, these mining billionaires. And we're all going to find out that we have a queen we knew nothing about. And it came back from the Attorney General's office. And we're standing in a church, but it was a bit creepy because the number for the office is all sixes. So at first I saw the phone number and I was a bit worried. And it said, Queen Elizabeth II was crowned Queen of England on the 2nd of June 1953. And Jill and I thought, well, that's not answered who the Queen of Australia is. So we asked again, what do you mean? And they said, well, as per the 1973 Royal Styles and Titles Act, the Queen changed her title to Queen of Australia. And as a Brit, I thought, I don't remember her doing that. No one told us in England she was now Queen of Australia. And I thought, would she give up QE2 like that? I mean, they took the time to write it on the boats, so I can't see her changing all the boats to Queen of Australia. And of course, they were wrong, and they knew they were wrong, and they continued on the conversation with us, and then they started to get nervous and said, well, you've only got until July 14th to ask another question, and then we'll consider this matter settled. So we said, okay, can we have a list of all the referendums that have happened in Australia? And so, of course, as it turns out, there is no Queen of Australia, and we informed the Attorney General's office that there is no Queen of Australia, that they were actually referring to Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of England, and that the Queen of Australia is a legal fiction. That's the term. I like to use the term legal deception. Because what started happening then for the last 51 years, 51 years, I'm 54 years old. So from the time I was 3 years old, Australians have been deceived. And I've been here for 30 years and I didn't know you were being deceived. And I consider myself pretty awake. So this title in documents and oaths and swearing in and legal documents started appearing, Queen of Australia. Now, they say that because Queen Elizabeth II of England signed the Royal Styles and Title Act, and you can see the signature on the front, the Attorney General's office sent it to us so we could have a look. If you've ever signed a document, a mortgage, a land deed, a contract for work, anything, you will know that each page has to be initialed, and then you have the back page and you have the typed out, one would imagine if one was lucky enough, Queen Elizabeth II of England, may she rest in peace, and also everyone else who witnessed the signature. There's none of that. There is a scroll, Queen Elizabeth II on the front, but what that means, as per royal protocol, is that she's read the document. That's what that means. It's literally like me doing a fan signature at a personal appearance. It doesn't mean anything legal. But what they took that to mean is that they could create a corporate entity called the Queen of Australia and have this corporate entity controlled by the Labor Party, registered for tax in America, foreign interference. Does anyone care about that? Treason. That this Queen of Australia would pass bills and laws. So the Labor Party are passing bills and laws. That's what that means. So what this could mean is that all of your bills and laws since 1973 are unlawful. It could mean that. And of course, as I said earlier, what did we see from 2020? We've seen Australians treated appallingly. Now look, prior to all this, when I was an actress and a radio host, I considered myself proudly as a hard-working girl, mother of 3, to be a capitalist conservative. I'm also a Christian, I'm not all bad. I was a capitalist conservative, and I thought if I work twice as hard as everyone else, I'm going to get ahead and it's going to be okay. And even if my children are born with an IQ of 65, they won't need to worry because mummy would have worked hard and provided for them. But that all changed. That all changed in 2020 when things went awry. Now, as a capitalist and a conservative prior, I would have been behind a corporation of Australia if it was to benefit Australian people. We've got a situation now where Australian natural gas, 53% of it is given to Shell. They don't pay anything for it. Your gas, that's the commonwealth, the wealth of the common people, that belongs to you. Do you know that in the UAE, if you've got a clean driver's license, you don't pay for diesel or petrol? Because you're from the UAE and the oil comes out of your land. Wow. And it's your gas. It's your natural gas. Oh, if you build a house in Victoria, you can't even get natural gas now. You're not allowed it because they want to sell it or give it away. So 53% is given away. They give it away to the corporations, including one of Bill Gates' corporations, of course. And they also don't charge them tax. Quick question?
Yeah, just a quick one. This corporation...
Yeah.
This corporation has got shareholders, private shareholders. So how do we know that our tax dollars aren't going to the Bill Gates of this world? They are.
I know that some of these voluntary taxes you're talking about, I know that...
I don't pay tax. I tell them where to go.
Right. No comment there. I don't want to get arrested as I leave. I can tell you that you should be paying it into the Commonwealth Revenue Fund, which is, and we'd all be happy to, I'd be happy to, which is your Commonwealth Taxation Fund. But Labour Party closed that for you. So now you're paying it to the ATO, and the stakeholders primarily are Bank of America and BlackRock. That's who you're giving your
They're
taxes
foreigners,
to.
so
Yeah.
it's treason on our part
So I would have been behind
to
this.
give them money.
Yeah, I would have been behind this corporation of Australia if it was benefiting Australian people. Obviously, it's not. Obviously, you've been bulldozed into a situation, I feel, and this is strong language, where Australia is being raped and pillaged of her coal, her gas, her rare earth minerals. Everyone's getting rich from it except for you. In fact, you're being charged more for it as they're getting rich for it. And this also answers lots of other questions, you know. Loathsome creature though he is, and this is just my personal opinion, I don't understand why Bill Gates has the ear of our bureaucrats, particularly our prime ministers. And so the reason is they're a business, and they're in business with him. Now, because a corporation is based on dollars and not on, you know, what's best for the Australian people, they don't care that he is a known associate of a paedophile and a child sex trafficker. They don't care that he's on flight logs registered 37 times going to Little St. James, Epstein Island. They don't care that his wife publicly divorced him because of his association with a child sex trafficker, because they can make money with him, and they don't care if you despise Bill Gates. He's allowed free reign over Australia. He also gets some of that free gas. So the reason why we, trying to stay apolitical, wish to do this thing that we're calling the restoration of the Commonwealth is to get this train of Australia back on the tracks, because she's well and truly off. She's going through the outback. Now, the thing is, you know, the question, why don't we walk back into Parliament House? They have all the guns, and they took yours away. Primarily. So we are looking at a situation where, you know, one of my big supporters in this endeavour with GAP is a 37-year veteran of the Victorian Police Force. He was a CERT commander, CERT being the Critical Incident Response Team, those awful tanks that we saw in the pandemic. And all the memes came out and there were sort of 15 coppers on the tank and it said, somebody sneezed. We got the tanks out in the city. And he resigned because he didn't want to take the jab, but also he said there was no way he was ever turning his weapon on an Australian. He's now got a successful building career. And he also tells me he doesn't pay tolls, he doesn't pay rates, and he doesn't pay tax. Because he's suddenly woken up and he understands what's going on. And he told me he feels guilty that for 37 years he would arrest people and pull people over and accuse them of a crime, and now he knows they didn't commit any crimes. Now, talking of committing crimes, while these people have been busy bulldozing us, they've also been harming Australians in little ways, and I on my podcast try and talk about this as much as I can. Just last week there was a story that broke my heart. It's not bad enough that I have now lost 10 people post medical help. I also have about 30 people who are experiencing nosebleeds, the likes of which I've never seen, that make me want to run in horror because I don't quite know what's coming out of them. Heart attacks, myocarditis, pericarditis, lots of tinnitus, lots of neurological damage, lots and lots of COVID, unsurprisingly. And they're also continuing on with this financial persecution. So I have another family who's a friend of my family, and they have a 21-year-old daughter. And this 21-year-old daughter honestly looks like a supermodel. There's a small part of my brain that wants to sign her up to a 5-year management contract and I'll send her to Milan. I'm sure I could make a lot of money from this girl. But all her life she wanted to be a florist. And so her family set her up to be a florist in the village of Belgrave in the mountains. I'm sure you've been there, it's lovely. And if you ever go, it's called Fraulein's Flowers. She is a 21-year-old girl who gets up every single day and goes to work. She was frightened to get the medical intervention, and she got it on the very last day that she was allowed to keep her business. And they threatened her with a $60,000 fine. After she got it, they told her to place a piece of paper with her private medical information on. Imagine if we had to do this with other things. List your STDs, how many times you've had athlete's foot, and cold sores. You know, how many cold sores have you had? What blood type? This and that. They asked her to place this laminated piece of paper with her medical information on so that her customers could see. So she put it behind the counter because as you're looking at her at the counter, you can see the certificate behind, and some of their COVID police came in. And the COVID police said, geez, that's, you know, it's out the back there, it's a bit hidden behind you. And she's 21, and she said, well, I'm happy to put it on the door if it's not okay there. And they said, no, doll, you're okay. It was, ladies, you're okay, you can leave it there. 3 weeks later, she got a fine for $27,261. Now, her father's a bit feisty. He works in construction. So he took the fine, scrumpled it out, and put it in the open fire. And the next thing we know, for years and years, this was 2022, for years and years, all these COVID fines were being thrown out. And she thought, well, it's okay because I don't think they have jurisdiction to give me that fine. Last week, they called her and said they were going to kick the door in of her shop and that they had a legal right to kick her door in, to seize her assets, to pay this $27,261 fine for not adequately displaying her private medical intervention. So I put this young lady on my social media, hearts poured out across my social media, and she set up a GoFundMe page. What did this girl do wrong? this Australian girl. She took their injection, which must terrify her now with everything we know about it, on the last day because she didn't want to. She gets up every morning and she goes to work. Now, there are plenty of people in that age group around 21, whether they're Australian or they've come in from everywhere else, who are running around, committing crimes, doing anything they can to grab money from anyone. And you've got a hard-working Australian there, and she's being persecuted. And we can't put up with it. Because these guys in $12,000 suits, they come and go. Dan Andrews is out of here. He set up his businesses on St Kilda Road. Albo will be out of here. Scott Morrison is out of here. Because they come in and they utilize this corporation to do the best to make the most money for themselves and the corporation they can by raping and pillaging Australia and Australians, and they will do it until every last cent is gone unless we get this country back on the rails of the Constitution, the Commonwealth Constitution, 1900 UK. There are abridged versions. Someone told me there's an abridged version at the back of the room if you want to read it and have a look. I've talked publicly in the past, pre-pandemic, about the fact that I had a bit of a rough childhood. It wasn't all bad, but parts of it were very, very bad. And I can honestly say that the first time I looked into the eyes of evil, I was 5 years old, and it was someone I trusted, and they were a paedophile. And that's the day I found out that my next door neighbour was a paedophile. And it changed the colour and context of my life forever. Because I realised, A, as a child, you can't trust all grown-ups, and please don't trust your little ones with all grown-ups. But B, people are very rarely how they look. And so when you see someone there in a $12,000 suit who speaks very gently, Joe Biden speaks gently, and he's a psychopath. Albo has his little speech impediment. My son has a speech impediment. He's 14 and we can't get rid of the lisp. And now he hates it because Albo has one. Before he thought it was cute. Now he hates it. But behind the scenes, Biden isn't a doddery old fool. And Albo isn't a softly spoken guy with a speech impediment. Behind the scenes, they are ruthless and brutal. And the longer that they can keep you and your children entertained with television, get rid of television. That's their little message box to you. The TikTok generation, I just joined TikTok this week after promising I never would because I always thought the CCP were going to get me. Paranoid about China being the bad guy. And what have we learned in the past 4 years? We've got a whole bunch of our own bad guys to sort out before we even think about worrying about China. And I joined TikTok because someone said to me that Labour and Liberal are quite prominent on TikTok and the kids are believing them. So I thought I might be tracked, I might be assassinated, they might listen and watch and all the terrible things we're told about China. But I have to get it because I have to speak to these children. Now, just quickly before I take questions, why am I with Rod? I interviewed Rod on my podcast about 18 months ago. And like today, and like every appearance and everything that Rod does, you can clearly see that he's a very emotional man and he loves Australia. And at that point, I was interviewing him about these titles. And then 18 months after I spoke to him, I got a very strange message from sort of an intermediary person I know, a woman who's sort of a fixer in politics in Brighton. And she said, somebody wants to meet you. And I don't meet people. I have a little webcam. I just speak to that. I don't go and meet people. I said, who wants to meet me? And she said, well, it's the uni party. And I said, what, all of them? Like, who wants to meet me? And she said, well, a couple of their representatives want to meet you at a restaurant in Brighton. And I thought, that's it, I'm dead. I've literally stood there and called them all treasonous bastards for the last 3 years. My visa's cancelled. It's all over. I'm out of here. But I thought, you know what? You have to have mettle. And because I was that 5-year-old girl that looked into the eyes of evil, I thought, all right, I'll go and look into the eyes of evil again. I went on my own. I was a big girl because my husband was at work. And there were 2 people there, 2 women. One of them in bottle glasses, I was pretty sure was a psychologist or a psychiatrist, who stared at me with glasses at the end of their nose, I think trying to work out if I could be corrupted. Because then the other one, who was super nice, she was a lovely lady, she offered me a job for over $300,000 a year, overseeing the implementation of a 15-minute city in Frankston. Now, I could have said, what? You don't know me very well. But if my 54 years in business and in television and radio have taught me anything, sometimes it's good to shut up and just listen. And so I sat there for about an hour, and it became very apparent, you know, sometimes you see people's lips moving and your brain, well, mine does anyway, goes somewhere else. And it was literally like trying to reel me in, dangling the carrot of money. Because if I was tucked away on a high salary, making other people's lives a misery, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now, which is holding up a mirror to them. I got home, happy to be out of there in one piece, and the first person to call me was Rod. It was about something completely unrelated. We'd never actually met. Today was the first time we actually met in person. And he said, what have you been up to, mate? I said, you're never going to believe where I've been today. You're never going to believe what happened to me. And he said, he went quiet, and then he said, you didn't tell me you were prepared to get into politics. And I said, well, I wasn't. I didn't know. You know, it was in local council overseeing this. You know, they just literally put you in there. It really is selection, not election, when you get right down to it. And he said, well, if you're going to be running for anyone, you're going to be running for me. Let's talk about you running with GAP. So that's why I'm here today. Okay. And I'll take questions even about 5G. I hear lots of you are worried about 5G.
This is also to Rod, because I had a question, but the two of you to answer, I'm happy. I believe, and to my understanding, that the federal government and the state governments are all bankrupt. So they can't work because they're a corporation. So why can't we get, and I know ASIC is probably maybe on their side, but why can't we get bodies like that to go for them? Because they're corporations, they're bankrupt.
See, that's a nonsense.
They're not bankrupt, no.
No, but that's a nonsense, ASIC. That's another.
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
but I'm just saying.
Let's not go down there. Let's just go and get back into jurisdiction. Don't worry about that. Can be sorted out later, because that's no offence. It's a nonsense to go to somewhere to get remedy when it can't give you remedy.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
The whole thing is just out here. It's like wrestling with smoke. Just don't wrestle with smoke. Just come back to the tub.
But do you believe you're going to get enough numbers?
I don't know. It's up to it. I don't know, but
movement.
there you go. It's up. I do believe we will.
Yeah. I hope
we've
you
tried
do.
to put encouraging videos up and get singers to write the right lyrics and whatever. And I think I think all of you will go away today, and we must let Len speak.
Yes.
Quickly, come on, Len, because we're running out of time. But you'll all go away today, and let me tell you this. You know, we reversed the Aboriginal Culture Heritage Act because I rang up one of the advisors of Pootie's office in Western Australia, and took on his key advisor and held him to account, and he couldn't work out how he could get around indefeasibility, and they reversed the bill because it's non-compliant. At Section 2.3 of the West Australian Constitution, Len will tell you this on property rights, if it doesn't receive royal assent in Her Majesty's rightful title, it's no law at all. So I'm going to let Len come on and chat, and then we'll all take questions later.
Thank you very much.
You wouldn't believe I've been eyeing off this all night.
Hello, hello. It's a pretty hard act to follow. Could I have, how many people weren't here the last time I spoke? Any? Oh, so there are a smattering. Okay. Because I was going to not speak on title documents, but I think I better have. I'll show you just 3 or 4 out of the PowerPoint. I was just showing another gentleman earlier. Can you grab my mouse, please? Thanks. Thanks, Peter. Doesn't want to. That slide itself, very, very difficult to look at it and really comprehend what it's telling you. It's very easy to say that none of you sitting in those chairs do not have any legal documents to prove you own your house. No one in the whole of Australia has any documents to prove they own their properties. That is what it is saying. And unfortunately, that is the reality. None of us, myself included. The intriguing thing that worries me equally as much as that is the very people that we have elected at elections. They are the ones who have done that to you. Stop voting for them. Why do you call a cursor a cursor? Because you can never find the bloody thing. Okay, so this is Rod's constitution. Mine's a lot more dilapidated than his, but there is nothing in that constitution. Yeah. Thank you. So there is the way this document works. It actually is a restriction on all levels of government, whether they're Commonwealth or state parliaments. It is a document of restriction. So if the power is not in the Constitution, it is denied of the government, is another way of putting it. There's nothing in that that allows a corporation to have any power or jurisdiction over Crown land. You own your property and hold your property to the exclusion of all others because your contract when you purchase your land is a contract directly between yourself and the Crown. So you hold your property with exactly the same rights and privileges that the sovereign of the day held it. The only difference is we have reservations that are kept for the Crown, but it doesn't benefit the Crown, it benefits the government, and the government is supposed to use those funds to provide services for you. Also, there is nothing in that Constitution that allows the state governments to sell statutory departments. So your Victorian government sold the Titles Office Victoria for $2.86 billion. So the entity now that carries out those functions is a corporation. Aware Super is part of that entity. So it's a superannuation firm that is from New South Wales. And they control the superannuation, 150 billion of it, for over 1 million of their members. First, State Super acquired State Plus for 1.1 billion and promptly lost 400 million of that. So these are the companies now that are operating what should be your Victorian Titles Office. Aha. I don't have to find the cursor anymore. Okay, Barry O'Farrell back in, or just before 2012, copied a Canadian piece of legislation, passed it through both houses in New South Wales, then took it to an entity called COAG. So that's the Coalition of Australian Governments. By 2013, all of the states had agreed to adopt that New South Wales Act. So now in Victoria now, you have a piece of New South Wales legislation that controls every time a parcel of land in Victoria is transacted, sold or purchased. So there's the actual act that the Victorian government used in the transition from paper titles to electronic titles. So they enacted, right, the national law. You notice there it says LAW, not an ACT, not an act of a parliament. So that document was actually formulated by a corporate entity. When did the Victorian government cancel your titles? Well, here it is. On the 22nd of October 2016, your Victorian government took all of your titles, bundled them all up, threw them away, and now they're telling you that the only link between you owning your property is a piece of binary code which underpins the program on one of two computers, two private computers. Now, it is not a title. Doesn't matter how many times they tell you, oh, but you have a digital title. Well, it is not a title. It is a piece of binary code that has the lot number of your property and your details on it. That's another two acts that the Victorian government altered. So it's not me saying to you that the Victorian government cancelled your titles. That's what cancelled your titles. Interestingly, you Victorians have just got to be different. Well, whether it's Como or whatever, anyhow, there is a little bit, just a twinkle at the end of the tunnel, because the entity, the registrar of ARNEC, and I'll explain that in a moment, in Victoria, is a public servant. So you can actually write to her and ask her where the hell did she get the power to cancel your titles. Every one of yous, do it. Annoy the living shit out of her. Oh, and by the way, she'd no really of mine. Okay? So as well as being the registrar for Victoria, she's also the registrar for Victorian Water and an acting chief of LUV, that's Land Something Victoria. So COAG met in 2012, as I said earlier. Each of the premiers of all of the states and the chief executive officers of Northern Territory and ACT all agreed without consulting their parliaments. They went ahead, and if you could imagine that you are all the members of the parliament, you've just done a 90-degree turn over here and said, no, we're not taking any notice of you anymore, we're going corporate. So they created an entity called ARNEC, ARNECC, the Australian Registrar's National Electronic Conveyancing Council. So you have an entity that is an it. There's no constitutional power or jurisdiction for COAG. There is no constitution or jurisdiction for a non-entity to create anything like that. So once ARNEC was created, the first thing that they did then was created the Electronic Lodgement Network, the ELN. So there is a physical electronic network that covers the whole of Australia. The seed funding for that, 200 million of it, was provided by the Commonwealth Bank, 200 million by an entity called Link, L-I-N-K, who also happened to be the parent company of PEXA, P-E-X-A. So the third entity was Stanley and Morgan through one of their superannuation arms. So that was $600 million that was invested to create this network, set network. So then ARNEC went ahead and then created the Electronic Conveyancing National Law. Again, it's a law, it's not an act of a parliament, but that controls every land transaction through the whole of Victoria. So once they had done that, then, oh sorry, I'll go back up one. So once they had the national law established, then they created the Electronic Lodgement Network operators. So they are PEXA, as I mentioned before, primarily owned by Link. Link are the people who underwrote the development of all of your major highways and tunnels, right? This is the same entity that actually owns and controls, well, they did. I'll explain in a moment. They've divested themselves of it. So there we have the National Electronic Conveyancing Council, ARNEC, and obviously this is an it. There's nothing that has been through a parliament to create it. They then produced the Model Participation Rules, and that is the document that controls both PEXA and Simply Australia. That's what they operate under. So there you have the Electronic Lodgement Network operators, and they are the ones under which all of your properties, if you're purchasing or selling, are carried out through. The national law we've spoken on. So there's PEXA. Now, PEXA itself, because Link was part of the seed program, had an access through a back door. So PEXA holds 80% of those pieces of binary code of every property owned in Australia. So one company, right, is storing 80% of the details that link to your properties. Just recently, Link sold 42% of PEXA to a Canadian company. the worry there now is when PEXA was domiciled in Australia, they were subject to Australian law, corporation law. Yes, they are now subject to Canadian law since the transfer of the 42% of PEXA. That's not the problem. The problem is because it is now an international entity that is storing your title piece of binary code under international law. The people who have purchased PEXA now own that data. Now, I'm not saying that they have any rights or privileges on your property, but it is a worry now that the details of your ownership is now controlled by an international company and they actually own the data. So there it is. PEXA sold 1.6 of the 42% of PEXA to this Canadian company for $1.6 billion. So remember, I shouldn't say only, they put up $200 million in seed funding. Not a bad return, is it? That's the other group, Simply. It is actually Simply Australia. They hold 20% of the binary code. The only corporate entity that I've been able to identify at this point in time is the Secure Electronic Registry Victoria Proprietary Limited. So whether that now has been transitioned to Canada or not, that will take a little bit of time to track that down. So whether it's still an Australian proprietary limited company or has it become a Canadian proprietary limited company. There is the infamous Malcolm Turnbull. What Malcolm Turnbull did in 2020 was he tried to morph what was COAG, so the IT that was just sitting out there. He tried to hoodwink you, and as we were saying, it's going on and on and on. Nikki was telling you earlier on. So he tried to infer that the entity was now the National Cabinet. Well, that lasted about 25 nanoseconds in the High Court, and the High Court said, It is not a statutory body, so therefore you cannot embargo the minutes of the National Cabinet. So the other interesting thing is you cannot place an FOI on a corporate entity. So he succeeded in locking it away anyhow. When COAG was morphed into the National Cabinet, these are committees that COAG had created. So rather than our governments through the parliaments administering these entities, they are all being administered through what is now the National Cabinet, but they are not part of the government. So you read them, agriculture. The Attorney Generals get together outside of the parliamentary process, and they're making the decisions on legal issues. Community Services, Council on Federal Financial Relationships, date and data, disability reform. I think that needs some disability reform when you look at the problems with the NDIS, education, emergency management, energy and climate change. So there's 19 of them. Environment, health, housing and homeless, infrastructure and transport, Joint Council on Closing the Gap. Anyone worked out where the gap is? I know we've got one in Queensland, it's called Cunningham's Gap. Skills and workforce, trade and investment, veteran affairs, water and Murray-Darling Basin. They're all being controlled now by committees outside of the parliamentary process. And the last one, women and women's safety. Well, it took me a while, but I did eventually wake up that us blokes we don't even have a committee. So this is part of LUV, some of the regulations that have been made, not by the Governor-General. This is made up by the National Cabinet. And the reason I left this one up was just to show you no, I might have removed the wrong one, I think. Oh no, it's there. On the bottom one on the right-hand side, we strongly recommend you use a professional for land transactions. So in other words, the regulations that they have made for themselves to work through are so complex, you're going to have to go and hire a corporate company to do the transactions for you. So as I said earlier on, there is absolutely no power whatsoever in the Constitution for a proprietary limited company to actually transact land of the Crown. And you hold your property in fee simple. So as expressed in the proclamations, when Queen Victoria was proclaiming the states, she did that state by state. The authority for Queen Victoria to proclaim a state came from a bill from that colony. That bill was taken to the House of Commons, debated, may have been amended or not, and then with the consent of the Lord Spiritual, so that's the 50 bishops of the cathedrals throughout England, and their function in that process was to ensure that the rights and privileges of the Church of England were all kept. So the Lord's spiritual, through the Lord's spiritual and the Lord's temporal. The Lord's temporal are 50 land barons. So they are there to look after the rights and privileges of the English people throughout Great Britain. So then Queen Victoria would proclaim Victoria into existence. So that's basically the end of what I want to show you. Oh, sorry, that's the actual prayer from the petition that Rod was speaking about earlier, and I think Nikki mentioned it as well. What we're asking there is for the Governor-General's position to be declared vacant, the position of all state governors to be declared vacant, that all of the judges appointed under Part 3 of the Constitution, that's the section that covers the courts, their positions declared vacant. And the reason that we have the judges of both the High Court and of the state Supreme Courts is because they are the very ones who should have protected your rights and stopped the government from actually passing the legislation. The next lot are any public servants who have sworn allegiance to the false Queen of Australia. That's all of them. And also anyone from the House of Reps or the Senate. So it effectively removes everything. All state governments, the federal government, and all the judges in the courts. Now, this is going to take a period of time for that to occur. And I had another point I was going to make to back up what Nikki was saying, but it's gone. So that's when you're actually filling out the forms or signing it, right? Obviously, your full name, you sign the middle section, and your address has to be the address that is registered on the electoral roll. And the reason for that is the House of Commons will actually contact a certain number of people to affirm that yes, they are on the roll and yes, they have signed the actual petition. So on both Rod's GAP webpage and on a webpage that I have under the silent majority, both a covering letter and a copy of the petition and the signature section are on that website. We must be doing something right because about 4 weeks ago, the site thesilentmajority.org.au was taken down by the IP group that was housing it. So we have had to change the website for you to go and get copies of the petition. It is now the same anachrony, the silent majority, but it is simply .au. So there is no org in it. So you'll be able to go onto thesilentmajority.au and actually print off the covering letter and the petition page. And this is where we, Rod, myself, Nikki and everybody else who is involved, we need your help. Please go on the websites, print off a couple of pages, always print the covering letter because that people can read that and understand why we are going to the House of Commons. The reason is that both the power to create the states in Australia and the Commonwealth itself all came from the House of Commons. In our Constitution, and that's exactly what that is, the annotated Constitution of the Australian Commonwealth, right? In establishing that, right, Queen Victoria states that through a bill from the colony of New South Wales, debated in the House of Commons, amended, because what all of the colonies were asking was the right to be able to appeal a decision by an Australian court in the Privy Council. That was originally granted by the House of Commons, and so Queen Victoria said through the bill from New South Wales, amended in Commons, with the consent of the Lords Spiritual and the Lords Temporal, I proclaim the Commonwealth. So that's the power source, not only of our Parliament, but it is also the power source of your titles to your land. And that is why we are going to request of the House of Commons to actually rectify the injuries that have actually been afforded to the actual Empowering Act. So within the Constitution itself, and I'll see if I can find it in here, it's page 264. Those 2 pages there, I know you can't read it from there, but after we've finished, with Rod's permission, I'll put this down there. So what you're actually looking at is it's Act 63 and 64 Victoria. So that is the actual act that actually created the Commonwealth of Australia. That is embedded in our Constitution. The areas that have been offended is Part 2. The provision of this Act referring to the Queen shall extend to Her Majesty's heirs and successors in the sovereignty of the United Kingdom. So when Hawke in 86 created the Queen of Australia, he and his governments offended Section 2 of the Empowering English Act. Then again, when Whitlam, further back in 73, when he removed the word Commonwealth from all Australian legislation, so it is now just the Australian government, not the Commonwealth Government of Australia, he offended Section 5, and it reads, "This Act and all laws made by the Parliament of the Commonwealth under the Constitution shall be binding on the courts, judges and people of every state and of every part of the Commonwealth, notwithstanding anything in the laws of any state." That's laws that were preceding, that were there. They were still valid, providing they didn't conflict with the Constitution. So when Whitlam removed the word Commonwealth from all the legislation, he effectively offended Section 5 of the English Act. So when we present your petition, because it is your petition as much as it is Rod's and mine and Nikki and everyone else who signed it, all right? When we present that, we are asking the House of Commons not to alter the Constitution, but to enforce their Empowering Act. So they're going to look pretty bloody stupid if they refuse to do it. If they do refuse to do it, there is Plan B. And Plan B is contained within the Magna Carta. So when King John was forced to sign the Magna Carta in 1215, Section 61 of the Magna Carta affords 25 lords temporal, so that's the land barons, grants them right of veto over the Crown. So even if the House of Commons refuses to bring on a bill to empower King Charles to declare all of those positions vacant, those 25 Lord Temporals still exist today, and they already have indicated that they will exercise their power under the Magna Carta to order those places to be declared vacant. So, yes, we will take the petition to London. It will, in its entirety, be 20 packs of 250 pages. So, sort of going to exceed my luggage allowance somewhat. So I tell you that just so that you have the confidence of knowing that this is not just an act, it's not a normal petition that you sign and actually deliver it. A little bit like the, what is it? I still can't get my head around the Latin. Rod?
What's that?
For the QR, whatever it is. What we served on the clerk.
Oh, quo warranto.
Yes, one day I'll remember it. Yes, so that the Senate itself cannot refuse that. And the reason is, at law, there are maxims of law that are just unchangeable. And there is a maximum of law, at law, that which is requested and not provided is deemed not to exist. So I know that's to do with what we served on the clerk. So if they don't answer that request for the information that they are governing Australia under in 45 days, then it is at law declared they haven't got it. It does not exist.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a dump, and I sort of had to whistle through it quick. But any questions?
What we'll do is we'll get Rod, Nicola, and Len. If you sit at the front
everyone
here,
up,
yeah,
please.
just sit at the front of the chairs here, and then we'll do the last bit of Q&A before we finish up for the night.
Yeah.
So everyone, welcome.
Thank you for being so patient. This is our first go at the three of us being here. I think up here, Nick. Or
Yeah, come and sit down. We've got a microphone here, Len. So
Yep.
we can,
Yes, and
so
we have one
just-
up here now.
Yep, so we've got two roaming mics, so put your hands up if you want to ask a question.
Hello. Thank you, Rod. Nicola. Yes, I love the white wrap. And thank you, Len. The petition, how many signatures? No, I don't. I'm not being. Hello. 1, 2, 3. How many signatures do we need for the petition now?
100,000.
What are we up to?
Neither Rod nor I are
We've
real
got
sure.
quite a few. I think it's
over.
Is it 10,000 or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's.
Is there a PDF?
Yeah, no.
On the
we have
website?
a Plan C, which what Kelly is referring to. Karen is referring to.
People have signed this document but said that they don't want to put their actual address. And that's
Yes.
Because it's not valid. So we need to still get 100,000
Yeah.
any of those people who have incorrectly filled it out.
Yes. Okay. It's in my case, it's to PO Box 2400 in Mareeba where I live, but we may have to.
If we can get it in the next 10 days, I'm happy to collect it from everyone, and I will personally give it to these guys.
Yes.
So we need to get as many as we can.
Anyhow, we have another process that we are having a meeting about tomorrow, where there is an exponential assistance from how many people are part of ACA, the Aligned Council of Australia.
1.8 million.
Yeah, they have 1.8 million members, providing we can negotiate it tomorrow, and I believe we will. The two documents will be sent out to those 1.8 million people, and then we have the problem of working out how the hell we correlate it and get it back.
Well, we were putting our address there, and unfortunately there were that many coming in at one stage. The post office couldn't fit them in the box, so they were sending them back. So, and this is, I think they got wind of what was going on. It's a bit like your call flutes at election time. The council come and rip them out, but they keep the Liberal and Labors and Greens up there. So we just have to better put in place, manage it. We will get the numbers.
G'day. Bob. Is it Bob? Yeah. I just wanted to know how the government has overrun the 1900 Constitution. Yeah.
By totally ignoring it. So it's not up to the government to it is up to us to ensure that the government is compliant. So, and that is the start of what Rod and I served on the clerk of the Senate, and he was silly enough to invite us into his office before he knew what we were there for.
But can I say, if you put a CEO in your company and you don't keep control or track of or oversee what your CEO is doing, then they are tempted to slowly go off and perhaps do other things.
I've just got something to say about that question as well. So there is something called the Governance Accountability Act 2013, right? It's up on my social media. I'm sure it's up on GAP as well. So there's a section in there that is one of the most horrific things I've ever read. And it talks about the types of Commonwealth entities. So first of all, I don't like the word entity. That sounds like a horror film. But there's two entities. It's like a split personality, A and B. And the first one states that it's a Commonwealth entity that is a body corporate, a corporation, and B is a Commonwealth entity that is not a body corporate. That's the language. And you read that and you think, okay, well, which one is governing us? Underneath is a note that is absolutely terrifying. And the note says, body corporate Commonwealth entities are entirely and legally separate from the Commonwealth. Legally separate from the Commonwealth. So you could have these corporate governments. All we have now is a corporate government. We don't have a Commonwealth government, right? This corporate government could essentially commit human rights abuses. What have we seen for the last 4 years, right? Break constitutions. Look at the police brutality against innocent people. Look at the fines going out to people who own flower shops. It's ridiculous. They could commit these human rights abuses and the Commonwealth is not legally responsible. So that means we have no legal protections. This government is running roughshod legally. The referendum failed, but there wasn't a referendum to give the Queen of Australia our permission, our assent to create bills and laws. We didn't give that permission. If we'd given that, yes.
I can answer that for you. Remember, I was talking about the Empowering Act to actually create the Commonwealth. The premiers themselves wrote to the House of Commons and requested a bill to create the Australia Act. That was actually passed through the House of Commons, and in it, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II enforced, it was 14 sections, forced a 15th section that required that if the implementation of the Australia Act impacted on the Commonwealth, then it had to be subject to section 128, which is the referendum section. Yeah. So Bob Hawke just pushed it through the Parliament, never told the Australian people, never requested their consent to do it. So their 1986 and every law that has been passed since then is void ab initio. Yes. So by actually succeeding, and we will succeed with our petition, we instantly remove all of those acts that have been offending our constitution.
And that's why we've got to do an Oz exit, a bit like Britain with their Brexit. And our constitution is far more binding. Yes. They don't have a constitution, but our constitution is far more binding. And that quo warrento is up on our website. Yeah. Well, it is cold here. I'm about to put my beanie on. I'm freezing. But that's available for you to have a look at now.
It's basically a divorce of the corporation. We want to divorce the corporation of Australia and get back on track to have a Commonwealth Parliament, a Commonwealth government. For, on and by the people.
Because
you know what? All we want is a government that doesn't hate the people. Because right now this government does hate the people because you've just got dollar signs on your heads. Anyone running a business knows it's about the bottom line, and that's what they're looking at. So when we scream about our constitution and human rights, they hold you in contempt of their admiralty courts and say, don't mention that here, get out. Because they're not operating as a Commonwealth government or Commonwealth courts, they're operating as a corporation. And you're treated like another corporation, but you're not.
So that quo rento is available for anyone to go on the GAP website and download, and you can remove the live sheep trade bill and replace it with any other bill that you like. It's a template. It took us 14 days of making it so finely tuned and balanced, didn't it, Len? And many loads of wood at Kelly Newton Wordsworth's place at Williams, because it was cold there as well. But we managed to pitch it, and we got middle stump first up, didn't we?
Yes, and then we took 2.5 days to drive from there to Canberra, which is over 4,000 k's.
Well done.
Yeah.
I think Australians want what I want from their life. They want to be left alone. And right now, with the surveillance state going up and digital ID and digital currency, we are effectively being stalked by the federal government, stalked by the state government, and sold out, pimped out like cheap suits to any corporation that they can get into bed with who thinks they can make money from us. We need a government, we need senators, we need MPs, we need a prime minister who seeks to protect our privacy and our freedoms, and that's what we're trying to achieve at GAP. That's all we're trying to achieve. We're not incorporated ourselves, and we don't want anything to do with the corporation, and I certainly would not be swearing an oath to a fictional Queen of Australia, a corporation. I would seek to swear an oath to the Commonwealth, which is the wealth of the common people, which is you.
Well said.
Sorry?
Oh, so, look, sorry, I just had to put it on because... Oh, look, very interesting. Now, as all my court cases are, in actual fact, I should make my transcripts available and you could have a really good laugh. And yes, I was going to go and get counsel because I thought I might be becoming a bit addicted to the courtroom, but what happened is there is no question. I've been 8 years trying to put my story out there with all the distractions, but I was politically assassinated for catching the High Court with its pants down, basically. And I was ridiculed for doing that live press conference and saying if I do represent myself in the High Court, I'll simply go back down to the farm, shear a sheep, grab the belly fleece and stick it over my head and I'll represent myself, which I got reprimanded quite seriously by Malcolm Turnbull and George Brandis. I said, bring it on. But I've managed to stay true to my oath and to my countrymen, and for that reason I have never accepted this nonsense that I am a bankrupt. I think it is disgraceful that my own country has treated, well, it's not my countrymen, it's the people I thought that were, you know, the custodians of my rights, and being an inventor and a big contributor for business in this country. You know, I had a big farming enterprise, manufacturing, logistics company, you know, I was a player. So I have stuck true to my word and I didn't fill out the Statement of Affairs. And because if you fill out the Statement of Affairs, you consent to give up your rights, see? And that's why you don't do it. So 8 years on, we have a statute of limitations. Well, this case now, I've gone and filed back into the federal court for the purpose of taking an Australian court order against my corporate soul to get it off so that I can actually enter into a corporate government in order to come back under the Commonwealth. So I've filed, and it was successfully filed. I now have 3 barristers on the job. So straight away, I've been pursued by the Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecutions because they, and the Australian Electoral Commission, who every time I rock up to the polls to nominate, they immediately refer me to Australian Federal Police because they say I'm in contravention to Section 44. And it's always amazing that they say that first, but they still trouser your $2,000 nomination fee, which is about to come back and haunt them. So, so effectively, each time they put the Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecutions on me, and I've gone through about 13 prosecutors because I can prove that they have no prosecutorial powers, and they all run, because once you're on notice, like the Prime Minister and everyone, that you've been a naughty boy, if you continue on, that's when you commit a crime, and that's why this government keeps moving all its pawns on the chessboard. So we ended up back in the federal court. Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecution tried to put short minutes of orders to declare me a vexatious litigant. Well, that's a nonsense because I'm defending. I don't know how you can become vexatious all of a sudden if you're defending, not actually taking the claim to court. So they fell over, and then that order 1 fell over. Then the second order was, well, we want Mr. Culleton to put $50,000 for security across into the court. Well, hello a minute, you're just saying that I've got no money. So this whole thing is flipping. And
it's like everything else this corporate government does, telling you to buy solar panels and then telling you they're going to let Bill Gates block out the sun. It's all hypocritical.
It's all just
nonsense. Lies. When you
exactly.
break it down, it doesn't make any sense. And they're going after Rod because he understands the law and he knows where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And they'll probably do the same to me.
Well, it was interesting because they got the Australian Federal Police onto me, and the Australian Federal Police, his name was Kevin Lawmans, and Kevin Lawmans is the entity to apparently sign the prosecution notice. And I said to Kevin, I said, Kev, get on with him first name basis. I said, Kev, that's not my name. He said, what do you mean? And I said, no, you have to change it from all caps to lowercase. So I got the Australian Federal Police prosecutor, the police officer, to rewrite cross out the corporate name and put in lowercase letters in biro. And I said, can you sign it off for me? I should have put it up on the screen. And get this, when I went to court, the magistrate said, are you Mr. Culleton? I said, I may be. And she goes, okay. I said, well, hang on a minute. This is in my are we talking a corporate sole or an unincorporated sole? And the magistrate said, well, it's Mr. Culleton. I said, no, it's Rodney Norman Culleton. But for the court, I'll hand you up this document. If you can see there, that's me and my natural person. And she couldn't go ahead with the matter. So, because she didn't have power to deal with me as a unincorporated sole. So this is how
because she didn't want everyone to know that they have a straw man soul.
Exactly. So now we're in the federal court and we've got an orca on the phone because there's a real issue about this. Everyone thinks that the High Court of Australia over some nonsense, allegedly $7.50 key that made its way all the way up to the High Court over the key got lost in an altercation. But they think it was the High Court that removed me from Parliament. No, it wasn't. It was Parry who wasn't sitting lawfully, technically, well, he wasn't, making all these nonsense referrals down to the High Court and over this bankruptcy. He wrote to the governor. So now there's a big elephant in the room and the court's going, oh, well, if we let this go ahead, this is the instrument that brings in the Parliament now, and then if they don't, all the barristers are saying if the court doesn't deal with it, it's going to bring the whole judiciary into disrepute. Amen. So what I ask you to all do, and if you want to know corruption at its highest level, and I picked this up, as I did with the High Court not sitting in proper jurisdiction, but have a look at Culleton number 2. It's the most famous case that's ever come out of Parliament, and it's where the High Court, when I went to nominate, I looked it up, 25(1) little a, New South Wales, I think it's 1999. Local court must, command, not make any of the following orders. A, impose a sentence on an absent offender. So I could never be subject to sentencing. When the High Court answered the question from Mr. Brandis, they referred to that. And what they did is they said, the local court may not make any of the following orders. They removed the words must and put may in there to catch me. So that's when I thought, game on. If you want to fight this, because at the end of the day, you know, people always said to me, gee, it was really sad to see George Brandis cry when Pauline Hanson walked into the chamber with a burqa. And I said, no, he didn't. He got served a private prosecution by me prior to Pauline coming into the thing. And that's why they shipped him off to London. So, you know, I've got to write a book about this because there's so much, once you know what's going on and understand the game, you know, you can play poker pretty well with them, and they have got nothing to hang on. So God bless, get behind this petition.
The reason they do this is because we don't stand up against them. If you've got, they do see us as an enemy, I believe, or at least low-hanging fruit in sales terms. And I think, you know, they know that when we see documents and paperwork and we get served in court actions, that it's going to frighten us enough. And so it should, because only if you're wealthy can you afford to go up and fight these people. And so that's what they will continue to do. They're the big bullies in the schoolyard. And so what we've tried to do is amass a group of people who do understand what they're doing and then informing as many Australian nationals as possible. So we get to a point where they kind of have to stop bullying you because people are going to stand up and say, where's your jurisdiction?
And that's all it comes down to. I mean, I've had that many summonses put on me that I could fly like feathers on a bird, and it's very fortunate my mother gifted me a good set of landing gear. So, you know, it's you just got to just stand up for your rights. Yeah. That's what we've got to do, and all collectively come together. God bless.
And what we have to do, sadly, is put an end to this. So thank you so much for coming. Yeah. I hope you've all learnt something additional. Take it away, tell your friends, and go on the website, download the petitions, and start getting signatures for us. That is the answer. Thank you. Yeah. Yes. No. Yeah. Gentleman has just asked the website again is thesilentmajority.au. Yeah. Okay.